Welcome to the Bookworm Duo, where we explore a variety of books so you can find your next read. Let's get started. Today, we're diving into Never Saw Me Coming by Tanya Smith, a memoir that reads like a thriller.
It really does grab you from the start, doesn't it?
Yeah, you don't often open a memoir and the protagonist is breaking out of federal prison.
Exactly. It's not your typical autobiography at all.
Right, that opening scene where she impersonates another inmate to escape. I mean, talk about setting the stage. You know right away this is going to be something different.
It's brilliant how she uses that escape to hook you in. You immediately want to know, like, how does someone end up in that situation? And then the memoir takes us back to her childhood, to Minneapolis, to kind of unravel the hows and whys.
And it's an interesting childhood, to say the least.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
her dad had these connections to the wealthy elite, but also to people who were struggling.
Right.
So she was exposed to both sides from a very young age.
And I think that's key to understanding her, you know? Just imagine as a kid seeing that contrast, extravagant wealth and real poverty. That's bound to shape your view of money and ambition.
For sure. You can really see how it might have planted the seeds for some of her choices later on.
Yeah.
And she wasn't lacking in intelligence or opportunity either. She was super bright,
Yeah.
fascinated by computers and technology.
Which, as we find out, becomes a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah.
Because instead of a traditional career path, she ends up using her tech skills to manipulate bank accounts as a teenager.
It's almost like you have to admire her audacity a little, even though, obviously, ethically, not great.
No, not at all.
I mean, calling banks, pretending to be someone else, using social engineering to get into accounts and transfer money,
Right.
all before she even finished high school.
It's just fascinating, this young girl exposed to both privilege and hardship, and she finds this power through technology. It really makes you wonder, was it a form of rebellion? Was she looking for control? Or was it just the thrill, the allure of being able to outsmart the system?
Like a real-life Catch Me If You Can,
Exactly.
but with a lot higher stakes. And speaking of high stakes, the book delves into her personal life too, including her obsession with Michael Jackson.
Oh, yeah. That part really stood out to me. It's such an interesting contrast. Like,
Yeah.
you have this seemingly innocent teenage girl who's obsessed with a pop star. She even flies to California with her sister and cousin to try and meet him. And at the same time, she's got these increasingly sophisticated criminal activities going on.
Yeah, it's almost like these two sides of her are developing in parallel.
Yeah.
The teenage girl with crushes and dreams, and then this budding criminal mastermind in the shadows.
Exactly. And that complexity continues as we follow her to high school, Regina High School. It's a really prestigious private school that she attends on a scholarship.
Right.
And that's where we see how race, class, and privilege play out in her friendship with Piper, a wealthy classmate.
Their friendship, and what eventually causes a rift between them. It really highlights those unspoken dynamics that exist in society.
Oh,
It makes you think about your own experiences and biases.
definitely a pivotal section of the book. It adds another layer to Tanya's character and motivations. And then, just when you think you have her figured out, she drops out of college to focus entirely on her criminal activities.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's a bold move. For sure.
She packs up, moves to LA, ready to expand her operation.
A whole new world.
Nightclubs, high-stakes hustling, even more audacious schemes.
It's like Los Angeles in the 80s becomes her playground.
Right.
A place to test her limits and see how far she can push things.
Yeah.
And it's during this time that she meets Puigo,
Yes.
who becomes a major force in her life,
Yes.
both good and bad.
Definitely a roller coaster relationship.
He introduces her to new opportunities to make money,
Yeah.
but there's also a lot of betrayal and manipulation.
Classic femme fatale trope,
Yeah,
but with a modern twist.
exactly.
And it's interesting, Tanya, who's usually so sharp and calculating, seems to let her guard down with him.
Yeah,
She gets caught up in the excitement, the danger, and her criminal activities become even more daring, even reckless.
which of course leads to her downfall. She gets arrested in Minneapolis, facing multiple counts of bank fraud and wire fraud. And this is where the memoir takes another unexpected turn. Her twin sister, Taryn, gets pulled into it all.
It's a tense moment in the story, for sure. And it really shows how far Tanya is willing to go to protect herself.
Right.
She uses her twin status to her advantage, claiming that Taryn was actually the one involved in the crimes.
A risky strategy.
Absolutely.
And it ultimately works. She's acquitted,
Right.
but at a huge cost.
Yeah.
Taryn ends up taking the fall,
Yeah.
sentenced to 8 years in prison.
That's a heavy burden to carry. It makes you question Tanya's moral compass,
For sure.
Did she really believe Taryn was involved? Or was it a calculated move, sacrificing her sister to save herself?
It's one of those ethical dilemmas that the book doesn't shy away from. It
Exactly.
makes you grapple with these complex questions about loyalty, family, the choices we make when we're faced with impossible situations.
It definitely adds another layer of intrigue to Tanya's character.
Yeah.
You're constantly trying to figure her out, what drives her, how to reconcile these seemingly contradictory parts of her personality.
And then the book jumps back to her childhood again.
Mm.
Specifically, a visit to her grandmother, Grace, in Texas. Grace was struggling financially. And even as a teenager, Tanya was determined to help.
That desire to help those in need keeps coming up, doesn't it?
It does.
It's like she has this Robin Hood complex,
Yeah.
using her illegal gains to support family and friends, even donating to charities.
It adds this layer of moral ambiguity to her character.
For sure.
On one hand, she's a criminal mastermind,
Okay.
breaking the law,
Mhm.
exploiting systems for her own gain.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, she's driven by compassion, this desire to make things right.
It's such a fascinating paradox. Makes you wonder if she had channeled her intelligence and ambition differently. Could she have achieved even greater success, both financially and in terms of making a positive impact?
It's a great question. And it really speaks to the complexities of human nature. We're all capable of good and bad. And Tanya's story is a powerful reminder of that the line between the two is often blurred.
So true. So back in Minneapolis, after her visit to Texas, she keeps honing her computer skills. She describes becoming obsessed with understanding how banking systems worked, like it was a puzzle to be solved, a challenge to overcome.
Right. And her methods get bolder.
Yeah.
She even steals a computer terminal from her job at a bank, sets it up in her parents' attic.
Can you imagine?
I know. Can you imagine being her parents
Yeah.
and discovering that in your attic?
It's almost comical, this teenage girl orchestrating these elaborate schemes right under their noses. But it also shows her fearlessness, her willingness to take risks.
Definitely.
And her first target, of course, is her grandmother, Grace.
She decides to transfer some money into Grace's account, thinking she's doing a good deed.
Right.
But it backfires. Grace is an honest woman, so she immediately reports the unexpected deposit to the bank.
Of course. But she gets away with it. The bank just thinks it's a technical error.
It emboldens her even more.
Right. Like she's passed a test,
Yeah.
proving she can manipulate the system and get away with it.
And that's when things really start to escalate. She sees her abilities as a way to make real money now. Not just to help her grandmother.
Yeah.
But to achieve financial independence. Create a life for herself outside the conventional path.
She starts frequenting nightclubs in Minneapolis with her twin sister, Tom Crump. And that's where she meets Pogo, who quickly becomes her partner in crime and a major influence in her life.
Their relationship is a whirlwind. Passion, betrayal, manipulation.
It really is.
Pogo, while charismatic, is clearly using her for his own game.
You can tell right away.
And Tanya, despite her street smarts, seems blinded by her feelings for him.
She gets caught up in his world.
She does.
And her criminal activities become more and more brazen.
Like she's dancing on a tightrope, constantly pushing the boundaries, risking everything for the thrill of the hustle and the allure of this dangerous but exciting life.
What's fascinating is how she's pulled between these two worlds, the world of legitimate success and then this allure of her criminal enterprises. It's like she's trying to live this double life, but the lines keep blurring.
It's almost as if those early experiences with her dad, seeing both sides of the coin, created this conflict within her. She craves legitimacy.
Yeah.
But she can't resist the pull of the hustle, so she moves to L.A., starts college at USC. You'd think this would be her chance to go straight.
You'd think so. And on the surface, she makes an attempt. She gets a job at the admissions office.
Right.
Makes friends.
Yeah.
Going through the motions of the college experience.
Right.
But underneath it all, those old habits are still there.
Simmering.
Exactly.
And they boil over pretty quickly, too.
Oh, they do?
Instead of studying for exams, she sets up a new command center in her apartment, just like her parents' attic, and dives headfirst back into bank fraud.
This time it's not just solo missions, though. She partners with La Villa, who has connections to these runners, people who withdraw cash from the stolen accounts.
So it becomes a full-blown operation.
It does.
It's like she's building this criminal enterprise while also trying to blend in with the USC students and parties. Did she ever really think she could keep those two worlds separate?
It's hard to say. There's a part of her that seems to want normalcy, but then the thrill of the game. The challenge of outsmarting everyone. That's her real addiction.
It is. And her addiction leads to consequences. She gets arrested back in Minneapolis, facing serious charges. And this is where her twin sister, Taryn, gets pulled into it.
It's a pivotal moment in the story. You really see the moral complexity she's navigating,
Right.
faced with potentially losing her freedom. She uses her twin status as a defense, claiming it was Taryn involved in the crimes, not her.
Wow. So many questions there.
I know, right?
Was it a desperate attempt to save herself? Did she truly believe Taryn was complicit? Or was this cold, calculated manipulation? Sacrificing her sister to save her own skin.
The book doesn't give you easy answers, which is what makes it so compelling.
Right.
We're left grappling with those questions, just like Tanya probably did.
And in the end, the strategy works. She's acquitted.
Right.
But it's a hollow victory.
It is.
Taryn takes the fall, sentenced to 8 years.
That's a lot to process, knowing your freedom came at the expense of your twin sisters.
Absolutely. You have to wonder how that affected their relationship, the guilt, the resentment.
It must have been incredibly difficult. But
Yeah.
even with that weighing on her, Tanya doesn't slow down. She goes back to LA, dives back into her schemes, the money starts flowing again, and then a strange thing happens.
She starts using the money for good.
Exactly.
Wow.
She donates to charities, supports people in need, almost like she's trying to make amends.
It's an interesting layer to her character.
It is.
Is it genuine altruism or a way to deal with her guilt?
It's a question we're thinking about. But just as things seem to be stabilizing, her relationship with Poirot implodes. Jealousy, distrust, betrayal, it all comes crashing down.
There's that scene where Poirot and his brother rob her house.
Oh, yeah.
Brute to complete betrayal.
Mm-hmm.
And you see her whole world crumble. She realizes she can't trust anyone, that the life she's built is on shaky ground. So she makes a drastic decision.
What's that?
She leaves L.A., heads for Atlanta, with a suitcase full of cash, hoping for a fresh start.
You can sense that yearning, for a clean slate, a chance to break free from the cycle.
But like they say, wherever you go, there you are.
Exactly.
She can't outrun her past or her nature. It's not long before she's back to her old tricks, setting up new schemes in Atlanta. And as the stakes get higher, so does the risk.
And her luck runs out.
It does.
The FBI catches her in a sting operation, and she's back in prison, facing even more serious charges this time.
The consequences are catching up with her.
They are.
And she's in a much more vulnerable position now.
Because
she's pregnant
oh,
with
wow.
Pragot's child.
That's a huge turning point in the memoir.
It is.
Tanya, who's always been all about self-preservation, now has another life to think about.
And this is where her resilience is really tested, facing a long prison sentence. Motherhood on the horizon. She refuses to give up.
And that's when she pulls off her most daring escape yet,
Right.
impersonating another inmate. Walks right out of prison with the help of a sympathetic guard.
Talk about cunning.
It's incredible.
She reunites with Poirot.
Okay.
But their relationship is more volatile than ever.
At this point, paranoia and distrust have taken over.
They're both looking over their shoulders, waiting for the other shoe to drop.
And it does, of course.
It does.
The FBI catches up with them, and Tanya's back behind bars, facing an even longer sentence.
Crushing blow.
It is.
But it's also a catalyst for change.
In what way?
In prison, she has time to reflect. Think about the choices she's made, the consequences, the kind of mother she wants to be.
Like she's finally confronting her demons.
Exactly.
And instead of giving in to despair, she channels her energy into fighting for a better future, for herself and her children.
She even exposes corruption within the legal system, uncovering evidence that her own public defender was working against her. It's a shocking revelation. And it really highlights the problems with the justice system.
So even in the darkest of times, she finds a way to fight back, to expose injustice.
And her efforts pay off. Through appeals, she gets her sentence reduced and is finally released.
It's a victory, but it's bittersweet.
How so?
She's free, but she's lost years of her life. Her relationships with her children have suffered.
She has a lot to rebuild.
She does. Yeah, it makes you wonder how she handled that transition, going from that life to trying to rebuild relationships, re-enter society. It couldn't have been easy.
Wow.
And the book doesn't shy away from the challenges. There's this really poignant part where she describes giving birth to her daughter while she's still incarcerated.
Oh, wow.
It's a stark reminder of the human cost of her actions, how they ripple outward.
Yeah. It's heartbreaking to think about that experience, bringing a child into the world in prison. and then trying to rebuild those relationships later.
Mm-hmm.
Explaining her choices to her children, that takes incredible strength.
It does. And those relationships, especially with her twin sister, Taryn, they're complicated.
I bet.
There's hurt, resentment, probably anger. But there's also this bond of love and loyalty. That seems unbreakable.
It speaks to the power of family, doesn't it?
It does.
Even after all the betrayals and hardships, there's still that connection.
Yeah, like it can't be severed.
So ultimately, what does she do with this second chance? What happens after prison?
She focuses on rebuilding her life, reconnecting with her family, finding ways to give back.
Okay.
It's not a glamorous ending, but it's a hopeful one. It shows that even after making terrible mistakes, you can still find redemption, create a meaningful life.
And what about her past? Does she ever express regret for what she did?
There's definitely a sense of accountability. She recognizes the harm she caused. But there's also this defiance, like she refuses to be defined solely by those actions. She owns her story, good and the bad, and she uses it as a platform to advocate for criminal justice reform and to inspire others who might be facing similar challenges.
It's a good reminder that people are more than their worst actions. Everyone has a story, and those stories usually have a mix of everything.
Definitely.
Darkness and light, mistakes and triumphs, brokenness and resilience.
Tanya's story is a perfect example of that. As unconventional and messy as it is, it ultimately shows how strong the human spirit can be. Our ability to adapt, overcome, find meaning, even in the toughest situations.
So for our listeners who are intrigued by this story, what are your final thoughts on Never Saw Me Coming? Would you recommend it?
Absolutely. If you're looking for a memoir that's gripping and thought-provoking, a story that challenges you and stays with you long after you finish it, then this is a must-read. Tanya's story really gets to the heart of human nature, the choices we make, and the power of the human spirit.
It sounds like a book that will definitely spark some interesting conversations. Thanks for joining us. Subscribe to our channel for more bookish adventures and hit that like button if you enjoyed the ride. Don't forget to share the knowledge, and we will see you on the next episode.